So the first source that I looked at was Orchard, and he's coming from the perspective that religion could give us a moral compass if we could all agree on a certain religion and a certain interpretation of that religion. But that's not the way our society works. We have religious pluralism and kind of an inquisitive and skeptical mindset, and we're always seeking to learn more. So Mintz had a different approach. He really emphasized kindness, acceptance, and an others centered worldview. Lee says that there is definitely a line that divides right and wrong. And down here, I came up with some example right and wrong actions or attitudes in terms of educators. We have to consistently model ethics. So this is, I think, sometimes harder for young teachers, especially, and with social media, this has gotten more complicated. But if you're posting things that are questionable, that have pictures of you partying, or maybe you make a racist statement, that will come back to you, and people's perceptions of you will be changed, and that will make it much harder to be an effective leader. Bucaro gives some steps for following a moral compass. You need to know what your values are, he says, before you're faced with a hard decision. He gave some quotes from the Shawnee orator and military leader Tecumseh about how to live a good life. I like especially where he says how to treat others, show respect to all, but grovel to none. I think that's definitely something that administrators need to develop. There's different types of emotions that can drive our moral thinking or our moral reasoning, and they're divided into four main groups, and all of them really influence us. Sometimes, though, according to the Macomb School of Business video, our quote-unquote moral actions or moral thinking are actually emotions like disgust, lust, or infatuation, greed. They're things that may make us try to rationalize something, such as, I deserve a day off. It's really not a big deal if I take a sick day when I am not sick. I work so hard and I deserve it. So that's an example of rationalizing something and then calling it moral thinking. And according to Lee, people have to be able to trust you, and they have a right to be able to trust you. And this is especially true when you're dealing with children. Children and their parents have to be able to trust you if you're going to be a school leader. And here's my moral compass that I developed based on everything we've learned, but especially on Bucaro and Mintz. So you need to have others, have empathy for others at the center, and then there are other qualities I think that are important. You have to keep in mind how your actions will be perceived. You have to keep in mind whether an action is wise, whether it will have good outcomes. You need to reflect maybe with others. You should be honest. Those are all important characteristics if you're an administrator. And in the addendum, I didn't agree with the article by Orchard. I grew up in a very religious home, and I think some of the morality that I received there was great and led me to do a lot of really good things. But I think sometimes using religion as our only moral compass can be limiting, and depending on the religion, it can result in a lot of guilt and maybe focusing on the wrong things, such as my family was very interested in modesty, in women wearing, longer shorts or not wearing two-piece swimsuits, that kind of thing. And maybe not as focused on some of the other issues involved in ethics, such as dealing with structural racism, for example. So while I think religion can definitely be a part of our morality and our philosophy, I think that we do have to make our own moral code, and the one that I created with empathy at the center, I think, is an acceptable one for an administrator.